In the vast empire that spans countless worlds, where ancient bloodlines maneuver for power and entire planets are traded like currency, there exists a force more enigmatic than any army, more enduring than any throne. The Bene Gesserit. They are not rulers, yet they command kings. They are not soldiers, yet their words can kill. They are not gods, yet they shape destinies as if they were divine. Whispers follow them like shadows. Witches, they are called. Manipulators. Ghosts of an ancient order that never speaks its true name. But these labels are veils, thin, trembling, and utterly insufficient. For the true nature of the Bene Gesserit lies not in what is said about them, but in what has been carefully, methodically hidden. This video is not about what the Sisterhood shows to the outside world. It is not about their cloaks, their formal titles, or their rituals made for display. It is about what lies beneath. There are rooms in their strongholds where even the most seasoned Reverend Mothers do not tread lightly. Knowledge is stored in vaults not just locked, but erased from memory if necessary. There are rituals never recorded, truths so potent they must be wrapped in layers of lies to survive. What you are about to hear is not the official history. It is the shadow history, the story of what the Bene Gesserit have forbidden even themselves to speak aloud. This is a journey through the folds of secrecy. We will speak of bloodlines and drugs, of memory and manipulation. We will explore the edges of science and mysticism, where the Sisterhood has pushed beyond morality in pursuit of survival, and something far more elusive, control. We will ask dangerous questions. What does it mean to rewrite the fabric of humanity? To build myths not to understand the universe, but to enslave it? To carry the memories of 1,000 dead women and still claim to be an individual? These are not just secrets of power. They are secrets of identity, secrets of transformation, secrets that twist the very concept of what it means to be human. And so we begin, not with revelation, but with a whisper behind a closed door, a whisper that, once heard, can never be unheard. Let us enter the shadow. Let us listen. Before there was a sisterhood, there was only survival. In the aftermath of the Butlerian Jihad, a war not only against machines, but against the arrogance of humanity's own creation, the galaxy was broken. Technology was no longer trusted. Thinking machines had been cast into the abyss, and with them, much of what civilization once relied upon. But from that ruin rose something new. While the great schools began to form, Mentats to replace the analytic minds of AI, the Spacing Guild to reclaim navigation, the Sook Doctors to guarantee loyalty, the Bene Gesserit emerged with a different purpose. Their vision was not reactive. It was preemptive. Where others sought to rebuild, the Bene Gesserit sought to control what would come next. Their origin is not a clean line in the sand. It is a series of quiet movements. Women who remembered the biological sciences buried under dust and taboo. Healers who had preserved rituals once dismissed as superstition, now recognized as survival tools. Geneticists hidden in the ruins of shattered universities. These women found each other, not through politics or open declaration, but through silent recognition. Through shared memory. Some scholars claim the Sisterhood's lineage stretches back to Earth itself before the scattering of humankind. That in some secret arcologies, pre-jihad gene sequencers encoded human potential not for profit, but for purpose. That fragments of ancient religious orders, lost Sufi mystics and tantric schools of pre-industrial Asia, were woven together into a new ideological tapestry. Whether these legends are true or deliberately fabricated by the Sisterhood is itself a matter of manipulation. The Bene Gesserit are, after all, masters of crafting their own mythos. But one truth remains undeniable. They did not rise to power by chance. In the centuries that followed the Jihad, while planets realigned and governments collapsed, the Sisterhood embedded itself like a mycelial network underfoot. They offered healing, wisdom, and the illusion of humility. They demanded nothing at first, but in every house they touched, a seed was planted. a daughter trained, a whisper left behind. It is said that in the early days, their meeting places were caves, ancient tombs, repurposed temples, always underground, always cloaked in secrecy. Their early tomes were written on skin and bark, encoded in scents and sounds, so that only a trained mind could decipher them. Even their name, Bene Gesserit, is a riddle. Derived from corrupted Latin, it can be read as those who manage well, or she who bears, or even in good faith. Ambiguity is power, and they knew it. While the Landsraad was still forming and the Carino dynasty was consolidating its throne, the Bene Gesserit were already centuries into their long plan. Their idea was staggering: to shape humanity not just socially, but genetically, to weave bloodlines across generations like a tapestry, guiding traits toward a singular, ultimate goal. But they could not do this openly, not in a galaxy still haunted by the fear of control. So they cloaked their work in the trappings of tradition. They became nurses, concubines, advisors, midwives, always close to power, but never at its head, always part of the structure, but never its face. This was not weakness. It was design. They studied languages not to speak them, but to dissect them. They studied biology not to heal, but to manipulate. They studied myth not to believe it, but to seed it. Every story, every custom, every alliance, they turned all of it into vectors for control. In time, they created something few dared name: an alternate system of truth. Where others saw religion, they saw leverage. Where others saw history, they saw variables to test and reconfigure. The Sisterhood became the living repository of countless forgotten sciences, remembered not as static facts, but as tools for transformation. Science, when hidden, becomes magic. And so the Bene Gesserit became witches. They did not correct the label. And so the foundation was laid, not with banners or war, but with whispers and wombs. Their deepest truths, hidden even from the majority of their own ranks, revealed only through pain, loyalty, and the ordeal of transformation. This is where the story begins, not in light, but in the dark beneath all things. Not with triumph, but with long, deliberate patience. And from that shadow, the world would one day tremble. There is a right within the Bene Gesserit that separates the initiate from a sister. A trial not of strength, nor of faith, but of memory. It is called the Spice Agony. It is not spoken of lightly, not even among the Sisterhood. It is whispered only in the deepest chambers of the chapter house, invoked with both reverence and fear. For through this ritual, a woman may become something more than herself, more than human, but only if she survives. The agony begins with the substance that defines the very fate of the Imperium, the spice melange. In its purest and most toxic form, the spice is not a gift, it is a poison. One so deadly that it destroys the body's control systems, floods the nerves with hallucinogenic fire, and tears through consciousness like a storm. And yet, to become a reverend mother, a Bene Gesserit must consume it willingly. But this is not merely an act of endurance. The woman undergoing the trial must not only survive the transformation of her body, she must change the poison internally. She must consciously transmute the substance within herself, rewriting her biochemistry in real time. This is the threshold, to master one's own body so completely that even death can be denied, if only for a moment. If she fails, she dies. If she succeeds, she awakens. And what she awakens to is something far more dangerous than death: memory. All the female lives in her lineage. All the women who came before, whose DNA she carries, are suddenly present. Not as shadows or ghosts, but as full consciousnesses layered within her own. They speak, they advise, they scream. Some are kind, others are mad. All are real. This is the other memory. Imagine holding thousands of lifetimes inside your mind, knowing what it is to die in childbirth, to command armies, to be burned for heresy, to betray and be betrayed. Every sin, every wisdom, every instinct, inherited not by metaphor, but by presence. Other memory is not passive. It has agendas. And while most sisters are trained to navigate these internal voices, to compartmentalize, to filter and synthesize, the truth is far less orderly. There are times when a reverend mother may forget which thoughts are hers, when ancestral pain floods her emotions, when desires rise from another life, demanding fulfillment in the present. And yet, this is the source of the Bene Gesserit's deepest power. Not only do they preserve human experience across generations, they evolve through it. Their understanding of politics, psychology, biology, and religion is not just studied. It is remembered, but only the memories of women are available. The male ancestral line remains locked away, a dark corridor in the mind, bricked and barred. The Sisterhood knows this limit well. They fear what lies beyond it. For within those forbidden memories may lie violence too primal, egos too vast, truths too dangerous to contain. To open that corridor would be to invite madness, or something worse. Transformation beyond their control. And yet, they desired that door to open. They spent millennia breeding for the one who could survive it, the Kwisatz Haderach. But that story comes later. For now, we remain in the aftermath of the agony. The Reverend Mother walks forward from the flame, her body altered forever, her senses sharpened, her soul split across time. She is no longer one woman. She is a chorus, a vessel, a library bound in flesh. And the price she pays is never silence. For the voices never stop. Some whisper, some cry, some command. And through it all, she must remain herself, or be lost forever in the flood. To the Bene Gesserit, the human body is not sacred. It is a system to be studied, optimized, and, if necessary, engineered. Among all the orders of the Imperium, none have approached reproduction with such cold, deliberate purpose as the Sisterhood. While others celebrated bloodlines for prestige or married for power, the Bene Gesserit saw the human genome as a living archive, a code to be rewritten. And for over 90 generations, they wrote with meticulous patience. This is the root of what they called the selective breeding program. On the surface, it resembled matchmaking, arranged couplings between noble houses to preserve alliances and political balance. But beneath that facade was a grand biological design. The sisters tracked traits across centuries: physical strength, psychic potential, metabolic flexibility, intelligence, even recessive markers for prescience. No detail was too small, no union truly random. They controlled not only who would be born, but how they would be born. Bene Gesserit concubines were placed in noble courts across the galaxy. Trained in emotional reading, seduction, and social camouflage, they maneuvered their way into the bloodlines of the most powerful dynasties. Many of them bore children. Some were dismissed. A few became legends. All served the Sisterhood. They never did it for love. But their mastery extended beyond strategy. It reached into biology itself. A trained Bene Gesserit could alter her hormonal balance at will. She could control ovulation, adjust the chemistry of her womb, and even determine the gender of her child through conscious will. This alone would make them formidable. But the truth goes deeper. There are records, never confirmed, always denied, of experiments in hybridization, of attempts to combine human and non-human genetic material, remnants from before the jihad. There are whispers of forbidden embryos, never brought to term, designed to host powers the human body was never meant to contain. And then, of course, there is the Kwisatz Haderach, the culmination of the Sisterhood's genetic ambitions, a being bred not born, engineered through precise control of ancestry to bridge the gap between male and female memory, to see both past and future, to become the nexus of time and will. That he was not theirs to control was their greatest failure. But they did not stop. Beyond conception, the Bene Gesserit also manipulated the development of the child. Through in-womb stimulation, selective exposure, chemical modulation, they guided not just the birth but the becoming. They believed that personality, potential, even ideological leanings could be shaped before the first breath was drawn. Their breeding charts resembled sacred texts, full of symbols, intersections, warnings, and predictions. To outsiders, it was madness. To the sisters, it was precision. They mapped humanity like a sculptor might map a block of marble, not for what it was, but for what it could become. And behind all of this lies a terrifying truth. To the Bene Gesserit, humanity is not finished. It is a project, a process, a malleable species capable of directed evolution, not through machinery, not through implants or programs, but through the intimate, organic, and invisible force of flesh itself. They do not wait for change. They do not hope for enlightenment. They design it, in silence, in blood, and they will not stop until the species becomes what they believe it must be. Whatever the cost, it is called the voice, a single word, a tone, a modulation of breath and pitch, and with it, a trained Bene Gesserit can seize control of a human being's will as easily as one might grasp a cup. It is not sorcery. It is not magic. It is precision. The voice is one of the Sisterhood's most formidable tools, not because it causes destruction, but because it bypasses choice. It is the art of speaking directly to the nervous system, bypassing conscious resistance and commanding obedience at the level of instinct. To master the voice, a Bene Gesserit must learn to read a person not merely in posture or tone, but in resonance. Every body, every mind has a frequency, an internal signature shaped by history, trauma, ego, biology. The Sisterhood trains its acolytes to listen beneath speech to the cadence of identity itself. And then, once they have mapped it, they can override it. A single phrase, spoken in the right register, can compel a man to drop a weapon, fall to his knees, or confess a secret buried since childhood. It is a terrifying form of intimacy because it requires knowledge of the target deeper than they have of themselves. But learning the voice is not simple mimicry. It is a path of brutal discipline. Trainees begin with breath, hours of practice, learning to control exhalation, diaphragm tension, vocal placement, then pitch, then modulation. They learn how to fragment a sentence into dominant tones and submissive harmonics. Every syllable must be wielded like a scalpel. Then comes listening. They are exposed to dozens of accents, dialects, vocal stress patterns. They must analyze voices in real time, detecting mood, fear, hesitation. Eventually, they're taught how to mimic these patterns to deceive, distract, or dominate. This is not acting. It is psychological hacking. And then they learn to use it live, on other humans. The final trials of the voice involve fieldwork. A sister may be sent to infiltrate a political council, a merchant guild, a distant noble court. There, without revealing her identity, she must achieve an objective using only her presence and speech. It may take days, or minutes. Some missions require subtlety. Others require domination. But the rule is always the same. The target must believe they chose it themselves. Because true control is not visible. There are historical accounts, classified, erased, of entire negotiations turned by a whisper, battles averted, assassinations postponed, marriages sealed, treaties formed under duress so subtle that even those who signed them believed it was destiny. The voice, at its highest level, becomes indistinguishable from fate. There are dangers, of course. The voice does not work on everyone. The deaf, the insane, the prescient, and most dangerous of all, the trained. A fellow sister cannot be manipulated so easily, nor can someone who recognizes the trick. But even then, the power of the voice is not only in its effect. It is in the threat of its effect. A whisper from a reverend mother can unnerve emperors, because if you know she can control you, how can you trust even your own thoughts? And so the voice becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a presence, a silence in the room, a question you cannot unthink. Was that really my idea? In a universe ruled by force, the Bene Gesserit chose an invisible war. A war of breath, of pitch, of secrets planted in tone. And they have won more battles with a single sentence than others have with entire armies. There are libraries within the Bene Gesserit chapter houses that no sister may enter without invitation. They are not locked by technology, but by memory. Their vaults do not open with keys, but with reverence. The texts within are not merely secret, they are forbidden. And for good reason. The knowledge they hold is too volatile, too dangerous, too true. These are the deep vaults. In the early centuries of a sisterhood's rise, many things were discovered. Artifacts, scrolls, data cubes, remnants from the pre-jihad era, knowledge from the age of machines. Some were taken from fallen civilizations. Others were gifted in dark bargains with entities long erased from public record. And some were found buried where no sister was meant to look. The deep vaults house these relics. Here, one might find treatises on neural hacking written by rogue mentats, illicit genetic theories banned by the Landsrat, records of non-human intelligence contacts, and most dangerously, rituals, those that tap into the ancient unconscious of the human species, bypassing reason altogether. The Bene Gesserit did not discard this knowledge. They preserved it, but only for the highest levels of the order. Reverend mothers who enter the deep vaults must first undergo mental purging. They erase emotional attachments. They reinforce psychic barriers. Some speak of days spent in isolation tanks, reviewing layers of thought to ensure that no fragment of bias remains. Only then are they permitted access. What they read is not meant to be understood. It is meant to change them. The forbidden texts are written in shifting code, glyphs that alter based on the reader's hormonal state, sentences that resonate at frequencies affecting the amygdala. They do not just convey ideas. They implant them. Among the rituals preserved within are rites of ancestral awakening, distinct from the agony. These involve synesthetic triggers, smells, sounds, vibrations that activate dormant genetic memories. Some allow for communion with specific ancestors. Others risk erasing the self entirely. There are books bound in animal skin, printed with blood-based ink, that no one dares read aloud. Even the act of reciting them is said to invite madness. Not because they are cursed, but because their syntax hijacks the mind. These are linguistic viruses, composed intentionally to disrupt consciousness and rebuild it in a new configuration. And yet, the Sisterhood keeps them, because sometimes survival requires transformation. There are also vaults containing prophecy fragments, echoes of futures that never came to pass. Not predictions, but possibilities filtered through the minds of failed Kwisatz candidates or rogue navigators. These fragments are studied not to forecast events, but to understand the branching of time itself, to refine the margins where control can still be asserted. Among the most feared of all texts is the Litany of Silence, a record of Bene Gesserit betrayals. Not those committed by enemies, but those committed by sisters. Names, dates, acts of sedition or forbidden love, failed experiments, the creation of life outside protocol. These are not punished. They are recorded. For the Sisterhood believes in memory over judgment, in documentation over denial. And finally, hidden even from many reverend mothers, are the scrolls of the dissonant path, a series of writings theorizing a complete break from the Sisterhood's core dogma. They speak of a new kind of woman, one who does not obey the long plan, one who transcends the roles assigned to her, one who becomes not a tool of history, but its end. Whether these texts are prophecy, heresy, or preparation, no one truly knows, but they remain, sealed, guarded, waiting, because the Sisterhood understands a truth that others fear, that the most dangerous knowledge is not that which destroys. It is that which changes. Of all the instruments the Bene Gesserit wield, none is more insidious, more elegant, or more devastating than the Missionaria Protectiva. To the untrained eye, it appears as a form of charity, a gesture of respect for the spiritual needs of primitive cultures, a way to offer moral structure in wild and distant worlds. But this is a lie, a mask. The Missionaria Protectiva is not about giving religion. It is about planting control. It began quietly centuries ago as a marginal division of the Sisterhood. A handful of linguists, anthropologists, and psychohistorians were tasked with studying belief systems across the far reaches of the Imperium. But they did more than study. They began to intervene, using old myths, half-remembered deities, and archetypes embedded deep within the human unconscious. The Missionaria crafted designer faiths. They sowed prophecy like seeds, carefully, strategically, across forgotten planets and among desperate peoples. A chosen one would come, they promised. A Messiah born of a holy mother. A voice that would deliver salvation from the stars. They never intended those saviors to exist, until one did. This is the greatest irony of the Missionaria. It was meant as a safety net, a last resort. In case a sister was ever stranded or in need of leverage, she could invoke the local mythology and find herself welcomed as a divine figure, her words confirmed by the scriptures they had secretly written generations earlier. It worked too well. Entire cultures shaped themselves around these myths. Rituals evolve around them. Wars were fought over interpretations. And in their own cold records, the Bene Gesserit logged it all, observing the behaviors, adjusting the doctrine, ensuring that their embedded legends stayed on script. But no myth is ever fully controllable. Nowhere is this clearer than on Arrakis. The Freemen believed in the Lisan al-Gaib, a voice from the outer world who would lead them to paradise. A savior born of a Bene Gesserit mother. The Sisterhood planted this belief deliberately. And when Paul Atreides arrived, fitting every detail of the prophecy, they could not stop what followed. He became not just a leader. He became religion incarnate. And once belief reaches that level, it ceases to obey its creators. This is the danger the Bene Gesserit never fully admitted, that in manipulating belief, they also surrender to it. A sister may walk into a village intending to use the Missionaria's script, only to find herself worshipped in ways she cannot predict. The roles become blurred, the control slips, and somewhere in that chaos, people choose to believe. Faith, once born, does not care for architects. The Sisterhood has debated this internally. Some argue for scaling back the Missionaria. Others call for more aggressive myth engineering. But the truth remains. The seeds have been sown across thousands of worlds. There's no pulling them up now, only guiding their growth. They call it future slavery, but not of the body, of the mind, of the spirit. A slavery so subtle that the slave kneels willingly, prays gratefully, and dies for the story they were told to believe. And yet, in a universe where chaos reigns and war never sleeps, the Sisterhood continues to whisper their myths into the stars. Because in the end, control is not about truth. It is about belief. And she who shapes belief shapes destiny. The Bene Gesserit are often seen as a monolith, unified, disciplined, invulnerable to internal decay. That perception is a lie. Like all institutions that reach across millennia, the Sisterhood has not endured by being pure. It has endured by being adaptable. And adaptation requires conflict. Beneath the composed faces and ceremonial discipline lies a hidden history of rebellion. Not open war, not schism, but deviation, quiet heresies, acts of defiance committed not by enemies, but by sisters themselves. These are the heretics. Some are born from ideology. Acolytes who question the moral cost of the breeding program. Reverend mothers who believe that the Missionaria Protectiva has corrupted more than it has saved. Archivists who argue that memory is not truth, that other memory can lie. Others emerge from pain. A sister who falls in love and refuses to surrender the child to protocol. A mother superior who withholds key knowledge from the council, believing that power must sometimes reside in one hand. A field operative who decides, in a single moment, to save a life rather than advance the plan. None of these acts are officially punished, but none are forgotten. The Sisterhood does not execute dissenters. It records them. Deep within Chapter House archives lies the register of divergence, a chronicle of internal disobedience. It is not accessible to all. Only the highest levels may review it. And even then, its purpose is not retribution, but containment. Because the Bene Gesserit understand a paradox. Heresy, when acknowledged, can be harnessed. Some dissenters are allowed to continue within the order. Their perspectives become quiet test cases. Their arguments are studied, debated, absorbed. In this way, the sisterhood evolves, not by revolution, but by selective assimilation. But not all deviations can be tolerated. In rare instances, a sister becomes a threat, not to a mission, but to the very fabric of control. These women are handled quietly. Some are reassigned to deep space research posts, practical exile. Others are sent on impossible missions, where survival is unlikely but useful if achieved. And a few are removed. Officially, the sisterhood denies assassination. Unofficially, it teaches it. There are also those who leave of their own will, the silent. Women who reject their training, abandon their names, and vanish into the galaxy. Some become mystics, others mercenaries. A few try to live as ordinary women, though they never truly can. And then there are those who return, not as sisters, but as warnings. Broken, hollow, their minds devoured by unfiltered memories, their bodies unable to sustain the weight of their knowledge. They become living reminders of what happens when you sever yourself from a network. But even in this, the sisterhood learns. Some theories suggest that the greatest innovations of the Bene Gesserit, the voice, the agony, even the early phases of the Kwisatz project, originated from unorthodox thought. That dissent, when managed, becomes evolution. This is the secret creed of the High Council: control the heresy, or be consumed by it. Yet whispers persist, of sisters forming secret cabals, of breakaway cells studying forbidden technologies, of factions within the council manipulating the plan for their own vision. Unity is the face the sisterhood presents, but beneath it is politics. And behind that is fear. Because even the Bene Gesserit understand what they rarely admit aloud, that the greatest threat to the sisterhood has never come from outside. It comes from within. For all their strength, their mastery, and their influence, the Bene Gesserit are not immune to consequence. They are forged in secrecy, trained to suppress emotion, and molded to serve a plan they did not create. From the outside, they appear invulnerable, calm, elegant, composed. But beneath that surface lies a truth far more human and far more tragic. There's a cost to being a Bene Gesserit. It begins with compartmentalization. From the earliest days of training, young acolytes are taught to divide their minds into separate chambers: emotion, observation, analysis, response. This internal partitioning allows them to process trauma, disguise fear, and act with ruthless precision, but also fragments the self. Over time, many sisters report a growing disassociation, a sense of watching themselves from outside, of making choices without truly feeling them. They are not broken. They are sharpened. But like any blade, the sharper the edge, the more fragile the balance. Other memory adds another layer. Imagine hearing voices not just as echoes, but as willful presences inside your mind, each with its own desires, traumas, opinions. A sister must maintain dominance over this internal chorus. But it is a constant struggle. Some memories are seductive. Others are horrifying. Many are simply louder than her own thoughts. To assert oneself amidst that storm takes strength. But that strength becomes exhaustion. There's also the burden of ethical dissonance. The sisterhood claims to serve humanity, but not individuals. They manipulate, deceive, even sacrifice lives in service of a long plan. Most accept this as necessity. Others question, what does it mean to know the suffering you cause and proceed anyway? To see into a person's soul, to feel their fear, and still choose the path of control. Over time, some sisters develop a cold rationality, a detachment masked as wisdom, but others suffer quietly. Guilt, confusion, identity crises. A few seek absolution through acts of mercy, small, unsanctioned deviations that rarely make the archives. Others simply break, not dramatically, just silently. And yet, the Sisterhood allows no open display of weakness. Pain is internalized. Doubt is reframed as contemplation. The rituals provide no room for vulnerability. Even the agony, for all its brutality, is a test of control, not catharsis. There is no ritual for grief, no allowance for existential despair, only silence. And in that silence, many sisters begin to question a truth deeper than any plan. Who am I if I am built entirely for purpose? This is the final cost. Not death, not madness, but the slow erosion of the self. Because when every thought is conditioned, every feeling analyzed, every instinct second-guessed, what remains? Some say the Bene Gesserit have transcended humanity. Others say they have sacrificed it. But perhaps the most painful truth of all is this, that in mastering so many others, the Bene Gesserit have made themselves unknowable, even to themselves. For generations, the Sisterhood labored toward a singular goal: the creation of the Kwisatz Haderach, a being unlike any before, one who could see both past and future, one who could bridge the gap in other memory, the dark place, the male line, the forbidden door. They believed it would be their triumph. It became their undoing. Paul Atreides did not serve the Sisterhood. He surpassed it, and in doing so, revealed a truth the Order had long buried beneath ritual and logic, that some paths, once opened, cannot be closed. But what if Paul had not been the end? What if he was only a threshold? The Sisterhood never admitted failure. They never abandoned the possibility that another, better Kwisatz might one day emerge, one they could control. But among the deep vaults and the private thoughts of certain reverend mothers, darker questions began to form. What if the flaw was not the man? What if the limitation was the Sisterhood itself? The idea was unthinkable, and yet some thought it. What would it mean to create a female Kwisatz Haderach? A being who could see all that the Sisterhood sees, and more. Who could unlock the full depth of both maternal and paternal memory. Who could walk paths in time no male mind could endure. A reverend beyond reverend. But this dream, if it could be called that, terrified the council. Not because it was impossible, but because it was too possible. The Sisterhood had always maintained control by restraint. By channeling ambition through structure. A female Kwisatz would be outside that structure. She would answer to no order, no plan. She would be the end of control. Some theories whispered of alternate agonies, rituals performed under altered conditions, using forbidden substances, guided by unapproved memories. These were not conducted in chapter houses. They happened on fringe worlds, among experimental sections. Few were confirmed. Fewer still survived. Others explored psychic convergence, the merging of multiple reverend mothers into a single mental entity, a being composed of dozens of wills, functioning as one, a living collective mind. The danger was obvious. Identity collapse, power instability. But what if it worked? And then there were the biological aberrations, twins engineered to share consciousness, breeding lines twisted to encourage dual brain development. Infants exposed to pre-conscious stimuli in ways that rewired their perception of reality. The council banned such experiments. The archives preserve them, because even the most dangerous paths may one day be needed. Leto, too, the son of Paul, took one such path, transforming himself into something more than human, something beyond comprehension. The Sisterhood could neither predict nor contain him. And in the aftermath of his golden path, some sisters began to ask, was the Kwisatz Haderach ever the end goal, or merely a mirror held up to show the limits of the Sisterhood's own imagination? In hidden chambers, behind layers of security, certain scrolls speak of the last Kwisatz, a theoretical final evolution. Not male, not female, not human in any recognizable sense. A consciousness unbound by time, free of memory limitations, fluid in form and thought. A god? A mistake? A becoming? The Sisterhood no longer speaks of these possibilities aloud. But some still dream, and others prepare. Because the greatest forbidden path is not one that leads to failure. It is one that leads to freedom. You cannot walk through shadow without carrying some of it with you. We have explored the truths hidden beneath veils, the rituals whispered behind sealed doors, the ambitions wrapped in genetic code and prophecy. We have seen the sisters who obeyed, those who defied, and those who were consumed by the very knowledge they sought to wield. What then remains of the Bene Gesserit? They are not merely an order. They are a mirror held up to the galaxy and to ourselves. They represent the extreme boundary of human will. How far we are willing to go to control destiny, to shape our own evolution, to master every thought, every feeling, every possible future. But they also represent a question more terrifying than any prophecy. What does it cost to control everything? And more importantly, what is lost in the process? The Bene Gesserit would say that the price is justified, that without sacrifice, there is only chaos. That truth, in its purest form, is too dangerous for an untrained mind. That discipline is the only safeguard against collapse. But what they will not say, what they dare not say, is this, that in hiding the truth, they have become it. They are the keepers of what must not be known, the jailers of futures that can never come to pass, the mothers of lies wrapped in necessity. And in this, they are both heroes and villains of their own myth. For every child born to their plan, another is lost to it. For every voice mastered, another is silenced. For every path paved, 1,000 are destroyed. Yet the Bene Gesserit endure, because enduring is what they were made to do. Perhaps that is their greatest achievement. Not the creation of a super being, not the manipulation of empires, not the safeguarding of knowledge, so old it has become sacred again. But this, that they have looked into the abyss of human potential and stepped into it anyway. They have paid the price, and they will keep paying it, because someone must remember, someone must preserve, someone must decide, even if it costs them their souls. And so, as we close this chapter and return from the vaults of silence, let us remember one truth that echoes across all the darkness. To know is to be changed. And once changed, there's no going back. The spice must flow. What do you think is the greatest secret the Bene Gesserit ever kept? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the universe of Dune.